Hi, I'm Thomas.
Hi, I'm Adiel.
Hi, I'm Kartikeya.
Hi, I'm Tirthraj.
Hi, I'm Aiden.
And I'm Zach. This is our presentation investigating the different variables that determine the average room price of hotels. Keep in mind that all currency is in dollars. To begin, I'll briefly explain what our project focuses on and why it's relevant. Our project looks at hotel room pricing, specifically what factors help explain changes in the average price charged for a room. Now, hotels rely heavily on room sales as their main source of income, so pricing is a key management decision. If prices are too low, hotels may lose revenue, but if prices are too high, they risk losing customers to competitors. Room prices are influenced both by internal factors such as service quality, staffing, customer ratings, and operating costs, and external factors such as location, tourist zone, seasonality, and demand. This is why it's useful to examine pricing through both internal and external factors. Existing research suggests that hotel pricing is becoming more and more data-driven, using information such as past booking patterns, occupancy trends, and demand forecasts. However, pricing is rarely based on one factor alone. A hotel may charge more because of stronger service quality, but it may also charge more because it is in a premium location, such as the CBD or perhaps a waterfront area. The research gap is that it is not always clear which factors matter most, especially when some are within the hotel's control and others, like location or seasonal demand, are not. This is where our analysis becomes useful. By comparing different variables, we can identify which factors have the strongest relationship with hotel room prices. This matters because accurate pricing data can help hotels make better decisions about pricing strategy, service improvement, cost management, and market positioning. Overall, this research is crucial because pricing directly affects hotel revenue, competitiveness, and long-term performance. Understanding the mix of controllable and external factors provides clearer evidence for more effective pricing decision. Now, over to Thomas, who will explain the data and method setup.
The method. This process began with collecting data through combining publicly available information on hotel booking platforms with private specific data collected through industry-wide surveys and meetings with numerous hotels' operations and administration staff. Data was collected with a focus on objectivity and included both qualitative and quantitative metrics. Data was then cleaned and ordered to meet the requirements of the prescribed data dictionary. This meant that variables were given correct labeling in units, such as $signs for cash values, as well as ensuring all labeling and titles were consistent. For example, in location, ensuring Sydney was always recorded as Sydney, never as SYD. We also ensured the formatting of the data remained consistent, allowing it to be easily read and understood, with titles that made specific variables easy to identify. The hotels then had to be graded under a new variable called hotel type, a combination of price segment and service level, both of which we had to create. Price segment was derived from operating costs, partitioned into tertiles to produce 3 balanced categories of approximately 100 observations each. Then service level was constructed as the composite variable of customer rating and another new variable called staff room ratio, which was the staff count divided by available rooms. These metrics were both standardized to Z-scores and averaged out, as they were initially measured on incompatible scales, and were then partitioned into tertiles with classifications of approximately equal frequency. Hotel type was then derived from dummy coding service level and price segment into numerical amounts, for example, with a score of 1 equaling a low service level or a budget price segment. Naturally, the middle scores therefore dominated, and as a result, hotel type was determined based on the combined numerical scores, with 2 or 3 equaling budget, 4 equaling mid-scale, and a 5 or 6 equaling luxury. Multiple linear regressions were the primary statistical test used for this analysis, as they allowed average room price to be the continuous outcome variable and allowed for numerous variables, both quantitative and dummy-coded qualitative variables, to have their effects measured. A correlation matrix was also used prior to regression modeling, to identify the relationships between key variables and determine some of the models we would create. The models we chose as best were then determined based on the adjusted R-squared fit metric, with a higher amount better, as it demonstrates the proportion of variation in average room price, which is explained by the selected predictor variables, whilst also penalizing unnecessary or statistically insignificant predictors, and thus making it a more valuable measure than the standard R-squared. And now on to the results.
Now I'll be presenting one of the regression models from our analysis. This model explored how occupancy rate, customer rating, and hotel location influence average hotel room prices. Overall, the model explained around 65.7% of the variation in the room prices and was statistically significant, meaning the relationships identified were unlikely to be random. These variables were chosen because each capture a different factor that influences hotel pricing. Occupancy rate reflects demand, customer rating reflects perceived quality, and location reflects market appeal. Together, they provide a strong overall picture of hotel pricing behavior. One of the clearest relationships in the model was between occupancy and room prices. Hotels with higher occupancy rates generally charge higher prices. This suggests that stronger demand allows hotels to increase prices, which aligns closely with the real-world hotel pricing behavior. The model also showed that hotels with stronger customer ratings tended to charge high prices. This suggests that customers are willing to pay more for hotels with better reputations and overall experiences. The results reinforce the importance of perceived quality within the hospitality industry. Location also had a strong influence on pricing. Waterfront hotels were associated with substantially higher room prices compared to other hotel categories. This likely reflects the premium appeal and tourism value associated with the waterfront location. Overall, the model revealed three key findings: higher demand, increased pricing, stronger customer ratings, stronger supported premium pricing. And waterfront locations had the strongest effect on room prices. Importantly, these relationships were statistically significant, meaning the results were unlikely to have occurred by chance.
I'm presenting a multiple regression analysis designed to predict average room prices of hotels based on the predictors staff to room ratio, service score, and hotel type. First, staff to room ratio was chosen to measure operational intensity. Higher ratios could increase spending on salaries and therefore could lead to higher prices. Service score was included, assuming higher scores reduce price sensitivity. Finally, hotel type was chosen as luxury and mid-scale controlled the baseline pricing strategy. When examining the initial correlations, the data somewhat aligned with economic expectations. The luxury classification demonstrated the strongest positive correlation with room price, while mid-scale and budget showed negative correlation. Staff to room ratio and service score showed a very slight positive correlation. The model's performance is noticeably weak. The R-squared value is only 0.047. The adjusted R-square is also 0.034. This indicates that only 4.7% of the total variance in average room prices is explained by these predictors combined. Furthermore, most p-values fall short to be statistically significant. Looking specifically at staff to room ratio, we can almost see zero correlation. The trend line is essentially flat, and the scatter plot reveals extreme price variance regardless of staffing levels. This is confirmed by the high p-value of 0.803. Similarly, service score, despite a weak positive uptrend, the p-value is 0.8080. This variable fails to meet the standard 0.05 threshold for statistical significance, meaning that we cannot confidently conclude it drives pricing within this dataset. Luxury properties naturally sit at the highest price point. Crucially, the luxury variable was the only predictor in our entire model to achieve statistical significance with a p-value of 0.027. This analysis proves that the predictors are chosen are not the main reasons for shifts in average room prices. The extremely low R-squared value of 4.7% demonstrates that the true drivers of the pricing lie outside this model in unmeasured factors. Ultimately, the model lacks the predictive strength required for practical application. Now I'll pass it on for model 3.
For our third and final model, rather than selecting predictors arbitrarily, we constructed a correlation matrix to identify the strongest predictors of average room price. The darker the purple, the stronger the correlation. Here, tourism immediately stood out, specifically waterfront, with a correlation of 0.79, a strong to very strong relationship. Revenue and customer rating also showed meaningful positive relationships, and these were selected to form our Model 3. Next, we isolated tourism alone with airport as a reference category. It returned an adjusted R-square of 0.640, meaning that tourism alone explains 64% of the variance. Waterfront hotels here command around $261 above airport hotels, significant at less than 0.001. CBD sits around $41 above, also significant, while suburban returned a p-value of 0.105. So we cannot confidently conclude that this differs from airport hotels. Next, we added revenue and customer rating to form our multiple linear regression model, and this improved our adjusted R-square to 0.685. Every predictor except suburban was statistically significant, and each one unit increase in customer rating associated with a $20 rise in room price. Here, waterfront remains the dominant predictor at 249.74 with a tight confidence interval confirming high precision. Finally, these 5 plots show the predicted values for each predictor. The red line is a fitted regression and the pink band is a 95% confidence interval. The steep waterfront slope visually confirms that it drives majority of the price variation, being the strongest predictor in our dataset. Customer rating and revenue show positive slopes with wider bands too. Together, all of these confirm that Model 3 is statistically sound and our strongest model overall. Now I'd like to pass on to Aiden who will wrap up the conclusion.
So now on to the discussion. Our final model incorporates 3 significant predictors: customer rating, revenue, and tourist zone. All 3 carry positive coefficients, meaning that as each increases, so does the average room price. The model's high R-squared and adjusted R-squared of 0.691 and 0.685 respectively tells that the model explains a high proportion of the variation in price across the hotels. In practice, these predictors affect average room price in a fairly logical way. Revenue reflects the scale of the hotel's operation, with higher revenue hotels able to furnish nicer rooms and charge a more premium price. The customer rating finding is pretty intuitive too, as guests are willing to pay more for a better rated experience, and hotels that invest in quality often receive high ratings. Finally, tourist zone explains how location influences pricing. Those situated in the CBD or waterfront tend to have greater demand, as these areas are popular with tourists and business people, whereas suburban hotels have less demand and thus a lower effect on price. This data would be useful in the real world for hotel managers in order to determine what they should be charging for their rooms based on their location, ratings, and revenue. It would allow them to identify if they're undercharging customers or overcharging based on the model's prediction and other similar hotels. Onto limitations. Regression assumes a linear relationship, whereas in reality the effect of customer rating on price may plateau when ratings become high in almost a logarithmic curve. So that's one limitation. Also, the relationship between revenue and tourist zone may lead to multi-collinearity as more popular areas generate higher revenue. Finally, the revenue predictor doesn't take into account the hotel size, which may cause a smaller coefficient for revenue than what would otherwise be. For recommendations, in the future we could improve by collecting a larger range of variables, such as years in business or more detailed customer review data, which would avoid us having to create so many of our own variables. The next step would be to go back and separate some data to be used as training and testing data in order to optimize the model and make it more useful for predicting room prices in the real world. Thank you.